This is exercise 7 for Political Science 560. This is the exercise where we tie it all together. In our previous exercises, we've downloaded information from the Census Bureau, we've gotten information from local agencies, we've geocoded addresses, and as I say, we're going to tie it all together today. Now, I've divided this exercise into two parts. The first part of the exercise will essentially be preparing us. So we're going to pull down some additional data from Google Drive, we're going to get it into Map Window, we're going to get it all essentially queued up and ready to go. And then in part 2 of the exercise, we'll actually do the analysis. We'll build the buffers, calculate the values, and then generate the final Excel spreadsheet and the final map. So let's step back for a second and talk a little bit about what our goal was in this exercise to begin with. We had this case study where the Master Gardener volunteers were interested in identifying parcels where they could create new community gardens based on factors such as income, because they wanted to create gardens in low-income neighborhoods. They wanted to be near a bus route so people could use the gardens with public transportation. And they didn't want the gardens too close to existing gardens. And so those are basically the three criteria they used. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking those parcels. We'll talk a little bit more about the parcels in a second, but basically they're parcels which are tax exempt because in almost all instances, community gardens get established on some kind of tax exempt parcel. They're at a church, they're at a government park, something of this nature. So we're going to start with the tax exempt parcels. And we're going to use Map Window to go through each one of those criteria: bus routes, low-income neighborhoods, and not too close to an existing garden. And we're going to be taking those parcels, and for each one of those particular factors, we're going to be tagging the parcel with a numeric value. So, for example, all the parcels that are within a bus route will get a value of 1. All the parcels which are in a low-income neighborhood will get a value of 1 as well in a different column. And then finally, any parcels which are within a buffer that is surrounding existing community gardens, they'll get a 1 as well. So basically we're going to be able to have for each one of our parcels a series of scores. We'll place those values in that exempt parcel layer, and then at the end we'll be able to query, we'll be able to basically search for all the parcels that are in a bus route, that are in a low-income neighborhood, and are not inside a buffer around the different community gardens. So that's the big picture of what we're going to be doing in this exercise. Let's go ahead then, and we're going to bring down from Google Drive 2 additional feature classes, one which contains the exempt parcels and the one which contains the bus routes. Now, exempt parcels I got from the Guilford County Tax Department. I asked them to give me parcels that were either government owned or owned by churches and things of this nature. The bus routes I got from the city of Greensboro and also from the city of High Point. I like to create a folder on my local drive to hold these new shapefiles which are coming down, just so I can kind of keep them straight. So let's go ahead, and that's what I'm going to do. You, of course, can handle this differently. There's no reason why you have to create individual folders. So I'm going to launch my File Explorer. So I've gone to the folder where I've had all my other data sets in my local drive on my computer. So let's go ahead and create a new folder for parcels. And also a new folder for bus routes. Next, I'm going to go to Google Drive, and I'm going to copy those 2 shapefiles down to my local drive. Here's my data sets, bus routes. I'm going to select all of these features, or all these files. And I'm going to go back to where I had my local data sets. And I'll go ahead and paste those. Then back up to Google Drive again, data sets. I'm going to go to the folder for parcels. I'll select all of these. And back down to my local drive, the parcel folder, and I'll paste them all. Okay, so I've got my folders created, I've got my data brought down. Let's go ahead and we'll minimize this. Let's go ahead then and launch Map Window. I'm going to start with exercise number 6. This is where we left off last time. I'm going to ignore these error messages. And here's the project as we last left it. I've got the community garden geocoded locations. That's what the blue dots are. I've got the Guilford County tracts shaded by income. I've got one shapefile I don't really need anymore. So let's go ahead and we'll simplify things a little bit, and we'll remove the Guilford County Commission one. Don't really need it any longer. I'm going to highlight it in or select it in the layers legend. and then I'll click remove. Okay, so that removes that one. Let's then add in the feature classes or the layers which I do need. So we'll pick add. We'll go to where my data resides. Let's add in the bus routes first. I'm going to ignore all this mismatch stuff. And the next layer I'm going to add in will be my parcel. And now I have exempt parcels in as well. Zoom in on the map so you can see what we're looking at now. And let's go ahead and symbolize the bus routes so you can see them a little bit better. We'll double click on bus routes, appearance. We'll turn those to a blue and maybe make them a little bit wider, and we'll say OK. Now you can see my bus routes. Those are the dark blue lines. And then of course you can also see the individual parcels now. Let's identify one of these parcels. And of course, to identify a parcel, I have to select the parcel layer first, select it. Now let's do the identify. And we'll just go ahead and expand this so we can see all the parcel attributes. So you can see here we've got, for each of our exempt parcels, we have a parcel number, we have the address for the parcel, we have the owner of the parcel, we have a mailing address for the owner, and then we have the use code from the county, which in this case tells us this is government owned. So that's what we have for the parcels. What we're going to need to do is add several, I guess 3 new fields that will hold these scores so that when a parcel matches one of the criteria, we can put a value in that field so that way we can go back and figure out which parcels met which criteria. We're going to start off then by adding these 3 fields. Let me go ahead and exit out of this. Add fields, you go to the table function. Go ahead and we'll get this spaced a little bit better. In the field, you pick Get All. It retrieves all of the records, and at that point, the different tools open up for you. So we're going to pick Edit, Add a Field. This first field we're going to add is for bus routes, so we'll call it Bus Routes. We'll tell it it's an integer, and we'll say OK. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the other fields that we'll be using. One field for community garden buffers and one field for the low-income neighborhoods. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and add those 2 additional fields in. That you add them just like you did bus routes. You give it a name, you tell it it's integer, and you say OK. One restriction, however, is that when you're naming these fields, they have to be less than 10 characters in length. Go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and put mine in. So I've added all 3 of my fields. Let's scroll here to the right so we can take a look at them. So I have a field here for bus routes, a field for low income, and a field for near garden. Let's go ahead and close this. It's prompting me to save the changes, and I'm going to go ahead and say yes to that. In fact, this would be a great time to stop and save this whole exercise, because right now it's exercise number 6. We should probably save this as exercise number 7. So I'm going to pick Project, Save As. I'm going to navigate to where I've saved my other lab exercises, and I'm going to call this exercise 7 and save it. Okay, great. So it's showing me now that I'm exercise number 7, so that's just wonderful. Next thing we're going to do then, we've added the different fields. Let's go ahead and create what we refer to as buffers. So basically what a buffer is, it's an area that we set up or we define around an existing feature so that we can determine which things are near one another. And let's start with the first buffer. We're going to create a buffer of bus routes. Volunteer master gardeners told us that we wanted to make sure that any parcels were within 1/4 mile of a bus route. That way people could access a garden from public transportation. So to create buffers, we're going to pick bus routes, and we're going to pick toolbox. And under the vector operations, we're going to pick buffer shapes. Double click on it. The layer that we're going to buffer off of is bus routes. And we're going to do a buffer distance of 0.25. And we're going to say miles. And let's go ahead and we're going to save the results to where I've stored my other data in the bus routes folder. And we're going to call this Let's call this simply bus routes buffer. And we'll click Save. And we'll click OK. And it's building the buffer. It's also doing something we refer to as merging shapes. When we have features which are really close to one another and the buffers would overlap, what this does basically is blend them all together so you have a single buffer and not a lot of overlapping buffers. And we're going to add the new layer to the map. And we're going to ignore these errors. And now we have buffers, but as you can see, it's pretty hard to see what's going on underneath these buffers. So let's do a couple things. Let's go back to the Layers tab for a second, and let's take the bus routes, the lines, and pull them up to the top. So now you can see where the original bus routes are, and then of course the gray area around them are the buffered areas. We want to see what's underneath these buffers. We don't want to have this as a solid fill. So we're going to go ahead and change some of the symbology for the bus routes buffer. I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to pick the Appearance tab, and I'm going to pick More Options. I'm going to unclick Show Fill, and we're going to click Outline, and we're going to make the buffer outlines blue, and we're going to make them a small dotted line. And we'll click OK, and we'll click OK again. Okay, so now we can start to see the buffers. There are these small dotted lines. You know, that's just really too small a dashed line. Let's go ahead and do that again, but this time we're going to make them a little bit meatier here. Let's make them that wide, and we'll pick OK, and OK again. That's starting to look a little bit better. In fact, now that I've got the buffers out here, I don't even need the bus route, the line work at all, so let's go ahead and just turn it off. All right, so now we have our buffered area. So we can tell, for example, that this parcel is inside the buffer and this parcel is outside the buffer. Our second buffer will be around community garden locations. Let's go ahead and simplify the map a little bit by turning off the bus route buffer layer. And you can see the different points for each of the community garden locations. Now we've already created a buffer once for bus routes, so I'm going to step through this a little bit faster this time. First of all, I'm going to select the community garden geocode layer. I'm going to pick Toolbox. I'm going to come down to Buffer Shapes. And the buffer layer is going to be the community garden geocode. And in this case, the buffer distance is going to be 1 mile. And we're going to name it, we're going to put it in our data folder for community gardens, and we're going to name this garden buffer, and then we'll click Save, and then we'll click OK, and it will build the buffers. It says, do you want to add the new layer to the map? And the answer is yes. We're going to ignore those errors. And now you can see we have a whole bunch of buffers around the different community gardens. Let's, for example, we'll zoom out to the full extent, and you can see each of the circles around the different community gardens. We want to see what's underneath these buffers. Let's go ahead and zoom back in again. And we're going to take and change the way the buffers are presented so that there is no fill, and you can see the outline a little bit better. So go to Layers. We're going to double click on Garden Buffer. We're going to pick Appearance. We're going to pick More Options. We're going to turn off the Show Fill. We'll pick Outline. We'll make the color for the outline blue. We'll pick a style, which is a dash and a dot dot. And we'll make the lines a little wider. Pick OK. OK again. So now you can see that where we have buffers around each one of the points. So that's about it for the first part of exercise number 7. What we've done so far in this exercise is we've pulled down 2 additional layers, one for parcels and one for bus routes. And we have built the buffers, and in the second part of the exercise we'll start doing the analysis of the information that we have available to us.